Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. We have the most fascinating guest today. His name is Marc Nelson. He is the lead scientific researcher at Fellow One Research, who has pioneered body type science since 2003, which are the only scientific body types. He busts the traditional belief that there are three body types and you cannot change the body you were born with. Marc realizes that the obesity epidemic is directly related to genetics and body type science, not just from overeating or lack of exercise. Marc has had his own struggles with his health, weight, and fitness, as well as severe back pain, all of which he is overcoming with hard work, determination, and the acquisition of true knowledge. As he has also developed the scientific body type quiz with a focus on science-based diet, exercise, lifestyle, metabolism, and genetics, as well as the scientific weight loss programs, and the only online worldwide science-based health community at fellowone.com. So Marc's all about the science, and he's going to share his story and tell us all about it. So Marc, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you on the show. I love talking to you. This is not the first conversation we have had. And I just find your story, your entire journey fascinating, and your scientific approach to the body types and the work that you've done, because even, in all of my science classes, as I went through school and then even in graduate school, we would touch on, hey, these are the three body types, boom, and then we'd leave it and you'd never hear anything about it ever again.
Yep. And that is unfortunately kind of where we still sit now here in 2022. When I was trying to figure out why my body was so different, I definitely looked at the three body types, but they offered no real scientific help as to why my body was the shape it was, why I was missing muscle and muscle mass all over. They just told me that I was a pear or an apple or some arbitrary shape. And I basically left them in the dust because I was looking for real answers, not just hodgepodge nonsense. And so that's really how I got into body type science. But yeah, I'm happy to talk more about my how things started, if that's where you'd like me to start.
So you were looking for answers and solutions, not just a label that they were going to plaster across your forehead and say, okay, this is what you are and who you are, and you're going to be this for the rest of your life. And there's absolutely no hope for change, even if you want to.
That is well said. And that was how I felt. And I was actually in Boulder when I really went through the battery of doctor tests because I was just fed up. That was in my early 20s, but things really started when I was about 8 years old. I was actually a star soccer player. I was on the state championship team and I was the star, but I was 8. I was young and your body hasn't really started to grow and it's just easier to manage at that time. But I noticed out on the field during shirts off soccer or when I was down at the pool that my body was very different than most of my peers. That I was, when I would reference the standard scientific human body anatomy book body type 1 image that you find in any scientifically approved human body anatomy book, my body didn't look anything like that. I didn't have all those muscles. And when I would ask the doctor or my parents, hey, where's all this muscle that science claims that I have? They would say, oh, don't worry about it. You're well within your safe BMI weight range. And that's all that matters. And that's where I was basically stuck at through my teens into my 20s. And again, by the time I got to Boulder, I was working as a scientific researcher at CU. And I was just fed up. I was fed up with the stomach pains. I was fed up with the depression. I was just fed up with feeling terrible. Yet when I would go in and see the doctor, I was well within my safe BMI, which I worked hard at doing. I was normal weight obese. So staying within my safe BMI weight range was not an easy task. But I just didn't feel good at all when I was well within my safe BMI. And so when I was working at CU, I had a spectacular healthcare plan. And I went down and I went through the full gamut of tests and it was the same thing. Nobody helped, nobody listened. They told me that I came back totally normal and everything was fine. And I was like, but I'm not. And you can see all the skinny fat all over my body. And I showed it to them and they were like, well, it doesn't matter. You're well within your safe BMI. And I was just fed up. And I was fed up with working at CU. I wanted to run my own show. So I started the Biotype Science and I opened my own company. So
Good for you. And yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate, because at CU and Boulder, that's a pretty like advanced medically thinking type of community. I mean, they're they've got a medical school, and that's actually where I got my PT degree from. And for even them to be like, don't worry about it, you're fine, you're within normal, go off and live your life and go ahead and suffer. But knowing that you're within the range of normal.
Right. And that's it. These were, some of the best medical folk in the world. And this was what, 25 years ago now. But that's how far behind we were then in terms of understanding the human body.
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading up on Yahoo. What was it, over the weekend? There was a doctor from the Emory Medical School who he penned an open letter and was basically apologizing to obese people in general, folks like me who doctors have never listened to. They've just basically, as you just heard in my story, they basically just poo-pooed everything and said you're totally normal because all of our tests say that you're normal. This is about you. You must be lying. You must be cheating on your diet. We don't believe what you're saying. It's your fault. And so this doctor penned a letter and said, we're sorry, we were wrong. Because now we know that things like normal weight obesity are real. Skinny fat in general, which includes normal weight obesity, is real. So skinny fat is cellulite, thin fat, loose skin, saggy skin, crepey skin, and normal weight obesity. And these terms didn't exist a decade or more. They started to actually be accepted by the scientific community about a decade or so ago. So until then, they just didn't. They were given no credence whatsoever. And so, anyways, yes, your point is right on. I went and saw the best in terms of what the medical field had to offer, and they totally failed.
And I know personally the frustration and the incredible, I can't even think of the word, but how frustrating and demoralizing it is when to be dismissed like that and to be told either, for me, it was like, it's all in your head, you're making it up again, you're lying or you're drug seeking and stuff. All of these things when you're just looking for answers and you want help. And I mean, I'm sure that compounded to your physical and mental state is just to be dismissed and marginalized like that.
It was, and it wasn't just the doctors, it was my family as well. And my family, so obesity is common in our family. Mm-hmm. And so you would think that you would get more compassion from people who are experiencing the obesity themselves already. But because I worked so hard, I was such an active kid, and I was always well within my safe BMI weight range, everyone in my family just thought that I was naturally skinny, that I was naturally thin. And I wasn't. And because of that, they all were 100% convinced that I was just a naturally thin person, and I couldn't possibly understand their obesity struggles. And so I got the same gaslighting from them and my friends as I did from the medical doctors and such. And so I basically had no support from any side of anywhere, which is why in 2003, felt like the only real choice I had, and trust me, I thought about suicide, but the only real choice I had at that time, because I was so alone, was opening up Fellow One Research, and I basically just dropped out. I didn't have any money, so what I was doing had to be done with the bare minimum resources, and the only way to figure it out, because I had the bare minimum resources and because medical people wouldn't listen to me, I didn't have access to going in and doing MRIs and all the things I needed to be doing to understand it better. So I had to figure it out on my own. So I dropped out and I started doing my own scientific research, and that was basically just observation and understanding my body. And then that's where it really led to understanding that it's a scientific genetic fact that any part of the human body can be underdeveloped, including muscle and muscle mass. It is a scientific genetic fact that every vertebra houses a specific set of a specific set of muscle or muscle mass, both. And if you are lacking muscle and muscle mass relative to a vertebra or vertebrae, that will directly affect your posture. It will directly affect your metabolism. It will directly affect your ability to function day to day, including things like sports. I ended up having to quit sports in my teens, basically because I didn't have any muscle or muscle mass. I couldn't keep up with my peers. I couldn't truly compete with them. And according to my parents, especially, the only reason that I quit was because I am a quitter and I wasn't working hard. And so the final thing that I'll say on that is the analogy that I use in terms of me being out on the soccer field and trying to compete with peers who have the full body type 1. They have all the muscle and muscle mass fully developed. All that all that muscle and muscle mass, it equates to things like speed and agility and strength and athleticism, which is why you have folks like David Beckham, who became a superstar world-class soccer player, and you have folks like me who didn't. And so is that making sense?
Oh, it absolutely makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I loved what you said about, like the spine, the vertebrae, and posture, and how that has an impact on your metabolism and your ability to move. And I think a lot of people might be thinking, wait a minute, how does posture have an impact on metabolism? But if your spine is like crumbling, if it's not functional, then your internal organs aren't functioning to their full capacity.
Right. And really, it is based around the muscle and the muscle mass that is lacking. So if somebody says, hey, stop slouching, you might sit up and pull your shoulders back and hold that for the short period of time that you can. But if you're lacking muscle and muscle mass relative to the vertebrae that are supposed to make you have good posture, then you're going to go right back into having poor posture because you don't have any muscle and muscle mass. But more to the point with that is science recognizes that 1 pound of muscle burns 6 calories daily. 1 pound of skinny fat or fat only burns 2 to 3 calories daily. So if you're someone like me who was born in a body type 4, where most of my body, where there should be muscle and muscle mass, there was skinny fat of some sort, I was burning much fewer calories daily just because I had less muscle and muscle mass on my body. And again, I was a super, like when I moved out to Colorado, I climbed 14ers. I was super active still because I was determined to keep that weight off. I went and I lifted weights. I hung out with friends who were all body type 1s, and they were ripped and they can easily put on muscle mass. And I followed their exercise routines, and I followed their diet, and I followed their supplements, and I did exactly what they were doing. And they put on more and more muscle and get even more ripped. And I would go from having a sparrow's chest to having a raven's chest, just a bigger bird chest, because no matter what I did, it was nearly impossible with conventional routines to put on muscle and muscle mass when you're lacking that much muscle and muscle mass on your body. So am I making sense here?
Absolutely. And I just want to go back further because it had an impact on me that you said, the I think it was Johns Hopkins, I'm not sure, but that top physician wrote a letter of apology.
Right.
And when you saw that, did you feel somewhat validated? But I mean, all these years later, or
Most
did it?
certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, most certainly, because that's what our research has been saying since 2003, is that this is genetics. And I'm not saying that there aren't folks out there who are obese, who are definitely lazy and they eat too much, but that's not the case with everyone. And I wouldn't say that it's who knows what the actual numbers are, but there are plenty of people like me who have worked very hard, and yet no matter what I do, I deal with normal weight obesity, even when I'm well within my safe BMI. And so that was totally validating, not just to me as a person and all the things that I had dealt with throughout my entire life, but our research in general.
Mhm.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
great question.
So the other thing I wanted to have you talk about just a little bit more in detail, skinny fat, because honestly, even I have never heard of skinny fat before. And then when I started reviewing your profile and getting an understanding and talking to you, I think it was a week or so ago, then it made sense. And it's obviously like the cellulite and stuff. And I told you I was an incredibly skinny child, impossibly skinny, much skinnier than my two older sisters who were very robust in that nice healthy Eastern European way, that they could plow the fields if they wanted to. And I was just really tiny and skinny and, there's no muscle on me. But then as a teenager, I started getting cellulite and I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, so and likely it was already there, but because you were like me, and it sounds like you were probably an active child. Is that a fair statement, or were you not active but you were still thin?
No, we were always pretty active. You have to remember, I'm a baby boomer. So I was born in,
Right.
well, I'll just say it. I was born in 1956.
Right.
So, I mean, we played outside constantly. And even at school, we walked to and from school, even through high school, which was quite a long ways. But, and then we swam in the summer. There was a swimming pool that was literally off right in our backyard. It was right off of our property. It was a community swimming pool. So all summer we spent in the pool. And then in the winters, I started skiing when I was 9 years old. So yeah, it was always active.
Same here, and that was, you basically just mirrored my childhood. Was, if I wasn't walking to and from school, I was playing sports. I was down at the pool swimming.
Mhm.
Very rarely did I ever sit in front of the TV, because my parents, we definitely had a TV and we watched it from time to time, but it wasn't like nowadays where it's like 5, 6, 7, 8 hours in front of the TV, or just screen
Mhm.
time in general, where folks are playing video games and such. And we even had ColecoVision in the early 1980s, which was, one of the first video games. And so it wasn't like we didn't have access to all that.
Mhm.
It was just that I liked being outside. I liked playing. I liked being active.
Mhm.
So, like you, because I was so active, that kept so much of the skinny fat at bay. At least,
Mhm.
because what happens with the human body is, as you put on fat, um, you build fat cells. And science says right now that it's not possible to get rid of those fat cells once you have them. And we would argue that point, even though that's really cutting edge in terms of science. And it would kind of go hand in hand with our proprietary experimental exercises, which have helped me go from a body type 4 to a body type 2 over the last 25 years. So I won't argue that too heavily right now, because can't really offer that to your audience without, in a responsible way, because it's still experimental.
Got
But
it.
we would definitely argue that it is possible to get rid of the fat cells if you
Mhm.
do it in the right way. And that's likely why when you were smaller, like me, you were so active that you just didn't build out many fat cells early on because you were so active. But then as you started to grow, and
Mhm.
that cellulite, it started to become more obvious, because as the body grows, it just has a tendency to grow more cells. And if you have a tendency towards skinny fat, you have a tendency towards more excess fat. Therefore, you're growing more fat cells, and it simply becomes more obvious. So, is that logic and reason making sense?
Absolutely. And what was it? So you said that you really can't, give a whole lot of information about, specific exercises and stuff for the audience right now because it's still under, experimentation and stuff. But I do want to emphasize that you are giving them hope.
Yes, yes, and you can go up on our site. I do have a few exercises up there. Really, the idea of the exercises are that, so what's always pushing down on the human body is gravity. It's the
Mhm.
real weight that the human body is always working against. And if you can take advantage of gravity, and that's really in a way what yoga is doing. So if you do yoga right, the correct way, what you're really doing is you're holding a pose, and that pose over time, as you hold it, will help build muscle relative to the vertebrae that are being worked by that pose. Well, gravity works in a very similar way, that, as you're upright standing and you're walking, gravity is pushing down on you, and the human body is always working against that gravity. And so it's helping to maintain the muscles and the muscle mass. What we've done is we've taken things like yoga and Pilates, and we've turned those exercises upright in either a walking or just a standing, right? And now we're using the gravity. So it's really an isometric calisthenic type exercise, which again, I am living proof that it works, because I've gone from a body type 4 to a body type 2, and I still have more skinny fat on my body than I care for, but it's significantly less than it was 25 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I'm so excited to hear that taking the Pilates into an upright, posture, upright position. I am a Pilates instructor as well as some of the other stuff that I do. And, loved having, because I use that in my private physical therapy practice. So I had the reformers, I had all the equipment, because it is so wonderful to be able to put somebody who's injured or really can't move very well on the reformer, because it's a supportive environment. So you're not fighting gravity. So you can help the person find the muscles, find the movement patterns in a supported position before taking it up to gravity. But there's nothing like gravity to be able to strengthen your body and your muscles. And that's basically how I completely changed my body type, my shape. I didn't realize I was changing my body type because I really didn't know anything about it. But, and this was in my 40s. It was actually in my early 40s after I had finished graduate school. And I was overweight. I was in terrible shape. It was really embarrassing. And I figured, this is a piece of cake. I'll just go back to Pilates and ballet, just like I always did. I mean, what could go wrong? I mean, it worked before when I was in my late 20s or mid 20s, and body over 40, it wasn't quite so easy. And I even injured myself in ballet class a couple of times because I was trying so hard. I was like, oh, I know I'm going to get this if I just push a little harder. And I ended up injured. I even tore my tricep one time when I was doing something called grand battement at the bar. Grand battement is a big kick. So explain to me, this is how my body awareness was so poor that I was able to tear a tricep when I was just standing upright and kicking my leg. Isn't that amazing?
That is super interesting. But as you said, unfortunately, I'm now 47, so I feel your pain. As you cross that 40-year threshold, it is a scientific fact right now that the human body definitely changes, and the cells stop regenerating as well as they did when we were younger. Building muscle and muscle mass becomes more difficult, yada, yada. So that may have simply played into it, but that is definitely interesting that you tore your triceps relative to a kick.
Yes, it is a ballet injury that kind of went down in history. I made Denver history in the world's stupidest injuries that you could ever get in a ballet class. But basically what happened is my posture was so bad and my hip flexors were so tight. After sitting in physical therapy school for 2 years, I was very kyphotic, and I didn't even realize that, even though the mirror was right there, I didn't even know it. And as we were doing the big kicks, I was so far off of my standing leg that my weight was so far back, and I just yanked the bar as hard as I could with my left arm to get myself back up. And I heard the I felt a little in my tricep, and I fell against the mirror or the windows and down to my knees, and everybody looked at me, and I'm holding my arm. I says, I think I tore my tricep. And the ballet teacher just rolled her eyes and said, other side.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty
cool.
funny. Yeah, but that's the world of ballet. And one of my girlfriends said later, after the bar was over and we were moving center, and I'm just still hanging onto my arm, she goes, do you realize that your arm is swollen? And I says, well, I do know that it doesn't feel good. So I went home and put ice on it and did just, what I knew to do, passive range of motion. And the next day I looked and it was like, oh my God, I really am a wimp, because it wasn't even bruised or anything. I thought, gosh, how could I be so, how could I think that I got that badly injured? So it was that next evening that I was getting ready to take a bath. And I was running the water, and I looked in the mirror, and I was putting my hair up in a ponytail, and my arm was bruised from my elbow all the way to my armpit. And it was like, okay, I did tear it. And it
but
wasn't like I didn't tear the tendon, but just the muscle fibers.
it took a little more time for the actual bruising to show up. But did your tricep fully heal after that?
Yes, it did.
And so that's kind of it. I mean, healing the human body, as you know, probably better than anyone else, is it is an amazing creation, the human body.
Mhm.
And especially when we're younger, it has this amazing ability to heal itself. And I was fortunate enough to start my biotype science in my really my late 20s. I really started right around the end of college, I would say, but I started officially in my late 20s. And that was a huge advantage, because there were definitely times there was a time in 2014 when I was doing these experimental exercises, and I must have thrown a vertebrae out of alignment, and I screamed in pain for 3 months. And I literally woke up. I woke up that morning screaming in pain in bed, and I didn't have health insurance at the time, so I couldn't go see a doctor. Not that I probably would have, even if I did, because what was I going to tell them? That I was doing experimental exercises, and while doing standing yoga and Pilates in terms of yada yada, that I threw out a vertebrae, and they would have just looked at me like I was crazy and given me pain pills, and I didn't want pain pills. I looked at the pain like, I know where the problem is. Now I've thrown something out of balance. Now I have to figure it out. And it most certainly would have been wonderful if I had an MRI machine so I could actually know what's out of balance. So I have more knowledge to actually work on the problem. But I forged ahead in unbelievable pain, and I used tools like alcohol and wine and such to help numb the pain while I was doing my actual exercises. And I got through it, and whatever happened, I brought it back into a state of balance and fixed it. And I've gotten to where I am now. But that's one of the reasons why I don't really want to offer this any more than I have, because there's nothing safe about it right now. You can easily throw a vertebrae out. I'm here to tell you that it is unbelievable pain, and I don't want folks to have to go through that. But anyways, I would like to tell folks about the 4 body types and how we came to those definitions, if that's all right.
Absolutely. Take it away.
All right. So once I had gone through all of the body types that were out there, as mentioned at the start of the show, and I realized these are useless. They aren't actually telling me why my body is the shape that it is, yada yada. They're totally useless. There's got to be a reason why my body is the shape that it is. And so logically, I simply started to look at the human body in terms of there are 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 1 sacrum, and 1 coccyx vertebrae, which gives us 26 vertebrae. There's technically 33 if you count the bones relative to the actual vertebra, but if you break it down like I just did, there's 26. And so it just seemed logical to me that we have a body type 1. It's that image, if you see it in your mind's eye, it's that fully developed human body that you see in any human body anatomy book that's scientifically approved. That's a body type 1. It has all the muscle and muscle mass fully developed relative to the 26 vertebrae. A body type 2, then we figured, well, how about we break that down, and that is 1 to 8 vertebrae that are underdeveloped relative to muscle and muscle mass and skinny fat. A body type 3 was 9 to 17. A body type 4 is 18 through 26. We don't claim that those are written in stone, but we had to start somewhere, and that seemed like a fair breakdown. Now that we have hundreds of scientific body type quizzes up on the website at fellow1.com, we have a general breakdown, even though it's really early data. I can't really say that it's super accurate data, because we have such a small percentage of data relative to the whole in terms of the human population. But right now it breaks down to about 25% are a body type 1, 50% are a body type 2, 18% are a body type 3, and 7% are a body type 4. Now keep in mind that according to mainstream science and medical doctors, 100% of all human beings are a body type 1. And there's no debate about that. That is a fact. And if you go and ask your your doctor, they won't probably tell you that up front because it's a gray subject area. But if you look at their clipboard, if you look at what they're judging you by when you go and you have your annual checkup done, it is the standard scientific human body anatomy book body type 1, which is how they calculate the BMI, which is how they calculate the BMR. It's all calculated relative to that standard body type 1 image. And so what we are showing is that it is not true that everyone is born in a body type 1. Mm-hmm. And when your doctor says, yes, you were, the only reason that you don't look like it is because you're eating too many calories above your daily BMR, is simply too many calories. Well, that's also been debunked. The calorie in, calorie out method of weight loss and understanding the human body is wrong. It's just wrong. And it has been debunked, and science knows that now. We know that a calorie is not a calorie, that you can't eat a McDonald's French fry and get the same result as eating a piece of broccoli. It may taste better than a piece of broccoli, but in terms of nutrients, in terms of the calories, in terms of how your body uses it, food quality matters. So I'll sort of pause there and see if I'm making any sense, and then I'd like to talk about low carb diets.
Absolutely, and I'm just fascinated by this entire conversation. Just loving how you're connecting like the levels of the vertebrae and all that. And the calorie is not just a calorie; it's a calorie. And not only, okay, so you got the French fry and you got the piece of broccoli, and not only is it not as nutritious, that French fry, but it can also be very damaging to the body, to your body tissues, to your blood chemistry. I've just recently been digging deep. I think I might have even mentioned this when I talked to you before. There's a book out that's called Eat to Live. And I just got it because somebody recommended it. And it's just fascinating because he explained, it's a medical doctor who's explaining things in, biochemical terminology, but it's still understandable for lay people to be able to understand. So it's not that eat your vegetables because they're good for you. It's like, this is what happens when you eat this piece of broccoli versus this is what happens to your blood chemistry when you eat that French fry.
Very smart. And that is how we are approaching this as well. Because we believe that educating folks on why eating mm-hmm. healthy food is better for you, not just trying to pound it into them that mm-hmm. eating healthy is good, not eating healthy is bad. That doesn't make any sense to most folks. And what we want is we want people to understand why. So in terms of one quick question, in that book that you bought, are they saying that a calorie is a calorie, or have they moved on to the new science also?
I'm not really sure. I think it was, it's because he does focus on weight loss, at the very beginning, but that's not why I got the book. I didn't care really about the weight loss because my weight's been stable for years. But the other thing I did want to mention though is, when you're talking about that's what advising other people, on diet and stuff, and it's just educating them to make better choices, not because I say to do this, Amen. Because it's a better choice. And the other thing is when you start talking about, people are pretty twitchy about their diet. And it's like, well, we can help you with this. And the first thing that would pop into my mind is, oh, you're going to tell me what I can and cannot eat. Well, I don't like that. And I really don't appreciate that. I don't like being told what I can and cannot do. But the other thing that I noticed, even when I started following some of the guidelines in his book, is you start looking at your choices a little bit differently. And that French fry doesn't taste as good. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's just psychological because I know what's in it and what that heated up oil is going to do to my body, but you make better choices because you want to, not because you have to.
Well said. That is the goal. And that is how you get people to make positive changes in their life because they truly want to, not because, as you just said, they're being told they have to. If somebody tells me I have to do something, even if it's the right thing, I'm probably going to push back and say no, because like you, I don't like being told what to do. What I do like is being educated so that the choice that I'm making is the right choice because I know it is, because I have the knowledge to make that right choice. So with all that being said, glycemic index is where it's at, right?
Mhm.
And so that's really, if we're talking about the glycemic index, we're talking about how quickly a carb hits your system and affects your blood sugar levels and the amount of insulin that your body needs to bring your blood sugar levels back to a state of balance. So if we're talking about a high glycemic index, and I'm probably going to get these numbers wrong, I believe that anything above, I want to say 57 is a high. No, that would be medium. It's on our site. I should have that memorized now. But there's high, there's medium, and there is low. You can go to our website and read the full page on scientific weight loss, and it's all there. But I was reading a brand new article the other day about low carb diets and why they do work. And again, all this is up on that page that I just mentioned. But what the most recent science shows is that the bullseye for a low carb diet is actually 37 grams. And the reason is because starvation diets don't work. Cutting calories don't work. And here's why. The human body will go into survival mode if you start cutting calories, and it will directly affect in a negative way your metabolism. So you will start burning less because the body is trying to essentially survive when it feels like it's not getting the resources that it needs. So cutting calories and doing a calorie restricted diet, right, it really is not the best route. What the best route is forcing the body to burn fat. So how do we do that, right? So I just had this conversation with another diet and fitness person who just wouldn't hear otherwise. She's just really stuck in the old paradigm where she is convinced that the human body will burn muscle and muscle mass along with fat and calories that you take in, but there's no science that backs that up. And here's why. Because muscle and muscle mass is an extremely valuable resource. It is the very last thing that the human body will burn in terms of needing calories if it's lacking calories from either food intake or fat. It will always burn fat first if it doesn't have the calories that it needs from your daily diet. And and if it doesn't have either, it means that you are starving yourself and it has no other choice but to use muscle and muscle mass. And if you have gotten to that point, that is not healthy. You do not want to starve your body. Now, of course, as mentioned earlier, when you hit the age of 40, unfortunately for you and I and anyone else who's over 40, gradually the body will lose muscle and muscle mass over time if you don't find a way to maintain it. It just doesn't do as well when you're 40 or under, and that's just unfortunately a scientific fact. Hopefully science will get to a place where we can start to counteract that, because I know you work hard at keeping yourself fit, so do I, because I don't want to lose that muscle and muscle mass, but that's sort of is what it is. So in terms of, I use this analogy in terms of how the body works when it's burning calories. If I'm out at a campfire and I have plenty of wood to throw on that fire to burn all night long to keep the quote unquote metabolism burning, I'm going to use that wood first. That wood is the fat on my body, or you could also say that it's food that I'm eating in terms of calories. Either way, it's calories that are readily available to the body, and it is not a resource that the human body that is truly valuable to the human body, like muscle or muscle mass. In this example, if I start burning cash instead of burning wood for no other reason but because I have extra cash to burn, that would be the equivalent of the human body burning muscle and muscle mass, which it just doesn't do. We don't burn cash any more than the human body burns muscle and muscle mass unless we have no other option. And if we're at a place where we are burning cash in a fire to stay warm, it's a pretty dire situation. So what I'm getting at is there's no scientific evidence. And again, I went through this with a diet and fitness expert just the other day. And she was sending me all of these links to all of these studies that were saying, well, the human body does burn muscle and muscle mass. One of these studies was only for obese people. And when those obese people got really obese, they had to put on extra muscle and muscle mass, poor quality muscle and muscle mass on their body in the places where they had all the extra fat to help carry all that extra fat around. When they lost all that fat, right? Then they also lost the extra muscle mass that was built relative to that fat. And she was like, well, but see, I told you that the human body burns muscle and muscle mass when you lose weight. But that's just not true. It was simply burning the excess muscle that it had to build to carry all that extra fat around, yada, yada. So that was one study. Then another study was you had a healthy person who they didn't take into account any skinny fat whatsoever, and there were no skinny fat calculations, and all that they said was there was muscle mass and then non-muscle mass, and they were saying that at the end, because there was mass missing on the human body, and because they had accounted for the fat on the body, that the non-muscle mass must have been muscle mass, but they weren't taking into account skinny fat. So someone like me, who, if I am dealing with losing weight and I get down within my safe BMI weight range, according to that study, I would have lost a bunch of muscle mass in my weight loss process, but it was muscle mass that was never there to begin with. Right. So am I making sense here?
I love the analogy about the wood and the cash.
Yeah, I mean,
that makes perfect sense.
And so we get so many folks who take our scientific body type quiz and then they use our scientific weight loss diary. We had one girl recently who was 23. She did a great job. She lost the weight safely. We have all of her data up on the site. And when she lost the weight, she was at the edge of her safe BMI weight range. When she finished, she had lost 19 pounds and got into the mid range. And the first thing that she said when she looked at her body and there was still skinny fat all over it, she did not look like the standard scientific human body, unidentified book body type 1, like her doctor said that she would when she did all the work and she got down within her safe BMI. She didn't look like a body type 1. She was missing muscle and muscle mass everywhere. In place of it was the skinny fat, and it correlated directly to the quiz results and the vertebrae that we had identified that were lacking muscle and muscle mass, and in place of that muscle and muscle mass was skinny fat. And her first response was, well, I must have lost muscle and muscle mass when I was losing weight. And that's the same response that we get from so many people is, no, I must have lost muscle and muscle mass when I was losing weight. But there is no scientific evidence that the human body uses or burns muscle and muscle mass unless it has no other choice, because you're starving it. And if you are starving your human body so that you can lose weight, that is a completely 100% unsafe way to lose weight. So is that making sense?
I have two comments to make about that, because I had a transformation, and that was in my early 40s after I finished graduate school. And I am here to tell you, I was able to replace my skinny fat with muscle mass. And I mean, yeah, it was amazing. I never had that kind of muscular development in my entire life. I mean,
what were you doing?
Well, I dramatically changed my diet. Number one, instead of pizza 3 times a night and then having the leftovers for breakfast with my coffee the next day, I got rid of all that. I got rid of all of the like starchy white foods, no rice and no pasta, of course, no pizza, and really started paying attention. It's embarrassing to admit, but even though, like, with my degrees and my background, I really was never trained in proper nutrition. It's just like, figure it out on your own. So I basically just used common sense, went for the lean proteins, lots of salads and fruits and stuff. And it was a very slow process. But the one thing that really got me fired up, and I mean really fired up, because I come from a family of very pear-shaped women, and even my Serbian grandfather was very pear-shaped, which was, and my uncle is crazy. But these pear-shaped people, very heavy in the legs, heavy in the thighs, wide hips and wide pelvis. And I had just started working with people on my own, opening up my practice. It was in the baby stages. And I had a slew of people that came in one right after another that wanted a home program. And I always used the Fitball. so we start, and I would teach them the exercises and do them with them. So always starting at bouncing on the ball, changing then the leg position. So we're getting different muscle groups, blah, 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 and worked. So probably it was 2 weeks. So I was probably working with the ball every single day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks. And I wasn't really paying much attention until about 2 weeks went by, and I was putting on a pair of pants and went, wait a minute, these don't fit the same way. And then I took the pants off and I looked at my legs in the mirror, and it was like, oh my gosh, I was slimming down in the target area that we were told we would never be able to control or to slim down. So that just really, lit a fire under me. And so that's when I really started paying attention to what I ate, and I started changing my diet. But here's the really funny part. I lost 3 pounds. My ballet master noticed it right away. That's how crazy ballet is. He noticed 3 pounds off my body.
Wow.
I know, it's really, really funny. So, and then I'd seen my doctor at the same time, and she came in and she's looking at my chart and she goes, you've lost weight. And I says, well, just 3 pounds. And she was so excited. My ballet master was so excited. And I thought, maybe I can lose a little bit more. So then I ended up losing 5 pounds, and people were starting to notice. My husband never said a word.
Wow.
So it's like, this is interesting. So I was doing my own little experimentation. So I kept on, going down. I had a goal. I knew how much I wanted to lose. I ended up losing 15 pounds in a couple of months. It took a few months, but, and it was very, very slow. It was gradual. And I could see my shape actually changing. And one day, and never said a word to my husband, he never said a word to me. Everybody else was noticing, but this gets really funny. So one day I was getting ready for work, and I just ran through the kitchen in my underwear, and I was reaching up for like a coffee mug in the cabinet, and he was reading the paper, and he glanced, and he did a double take, and he went, whoa, you're buff. Have you been working out?
And this is how long after you started?
Uh-huh. And I just looked at him because I wanted to see. And I just looked at him and I said, Mike, I lost 15 pounds. Classic answer. No, you didn't. And I said, yes, I did. And he says, well, you didn't need to. You look great. It's like, because I lost 15 pounds.
So in terms of the actual muscle that you built, were you doing the same exercises with the ball? Were you doing the Pilates? What were you doing specifically that you think helped? I don't want to say translate the skinny fat into muscle, because that's not how it works, but how did you reduce the skinny fat and add the muscle mass where you had skinny fat?
Excellent question. Yes, I did. I continued the ball work, not only with my clients, but then I was motivated. I was doing it every day at home as well. And I did add the Pilates, and, I had been already a Pilates instructor, but I really started to focus, and really focusing on, getting that mind-body connection that is so prevalent of the method for, Pilates and yoga and a lot of other things, but really concentrating on going through the movement and the shape of the muscles and what was happening as I was going through them. Then I applied all of that and took it to my ballet class, because by that time I was learning how to stand on my legs again. So I wasn't, ripping my arm muscles by pulling myself back on the bar. So I was using that same focus in ballet, and even my ballet was changing a lot. And of course, my ballet master was thrilled, because he had known me for 20 years and had never seen me be able to move like that. So even he says, your reflexes are so much better. Your reflexes are faster.
And this is in your 40s, correct?
Yes, I was 44.
Right. So that's great news for any of us who, are being told day in and day out that, hey, once you hit 40, you're doomed. It's like, no, you're not. You just have to, I don't want to say that you just have to do the work, because I was told that day in and day out from day one, and I did the work. And because of the lack of muscle mass on my body, that didn't fully apply to me. It was finding the right exercises. It was finding the right diet. It was finding the right lifestyle. And that's really what body type science is all about. You're the living example. I am, because what we've had is a lot of people who have shunned us and spoken poorly about us, because what they think that we're doing is that we are simply coming up with a new way so that folks can judge each other and say that I'm better than you because I'm a body type 1, I'm better than you because I'm a body type 2, you're a body type 3, and that's not what we're doing whatsoever. And we've especially gotten poor press from the body positive movement for essentially all that, and basically telling us that, we are setting a bad example in general. And what they don't understand, one, is that what they're saying is not true. It's both ignorant and arrogant and disrespectful. Our goal is not to, science in general, it exists to define and categorize. Whether it's biology or any other section of science, it all defines and categorizes. So our goal was to define why a body is a specific shape, a body type 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then in that categorization, we can begin to understand, this is my body. This is my genetic body. The first step in understanding your scientific body type is accepting it for what it is. This is genetics. Right now, you and I have talked about the ability to change our genes, our DNA. We know that that's possible, and science is beginning to wake up to the fact that it is most certainly possible to change your DNA. But that's not our first focus. Our first focus is accepting your scientific body type for what it is and figuring out what the best diet, exercise, and lifestyle is for it, which is what you did in your early 40s by figuring out what's the best diet, what's the best exercise. Once you figure those out, you are the living example. You have the evidence and the proof. You lost 15 pounds. You were actually getting rid of skinny fat, which again, mainstream science says isn't possible. I've done the same thing. I used to have skinny fat in places on my body where there's now obviously muscle, and it is most certainly possible. But it's basically accepting your body type for what it is, and then figuring out the best diet, exercise, and lifestyle for it first. Then, once you've done that, then you can do what you and I have done and start looking at ways, how can I improve my body type? How can I improve my body type shape? But we are most certainly not, as the body positive movement has claimed far too often, trying to say that this body is better than that body, yada, yada. That is not where we're at. We're simply trying to understand, especially after 47 years of me dealing with gaslighting and everyone telling me that I'm not experiencing all these things. I wanted to understand why. Now that I understand why, my goal here is to bring forward this knowledge up at fellow1.com so that people can understand their scientific body type, so that they can use the scientific body type quiz, use the scientific weight loss program diary, and come to understand their scientific body type and live a healthy diet, exercise, and lifestyle to be as healthy and sustainable as possible going forward. So is that making sense?
Yes, I just have to reiterate something I'd already said once before, is you're giving people hope.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a lot of times I was using myself personally as a guinea pig to see, yeah, right. It's like, you're welcome. I took the hits so you didn't have to. And, you know, so I forged my own way, figuring out, okay, well, this works, this doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how I fine-tuned, you know, my own path to getting into the kind of shape that I wanted. And I mean, it was truly remarkable because there were, especially in the ballet community, I danced with, you know, the same people off and on for, you know, gosh, at least 20 years or so. Probably by now it's been 40, but a lot of them saw the transformation and of what I looked like before, and then how I was able to change. And they were just blown away by it, just blown away. And even one of the women who has a lot, well, there's a lot of hangups on body image, as you can imagine, in ballet. And she says, I cannot believe that you were able to change your genetic, you know, family pattern, or you know, what you were given. And it's like, you can change anything.
You can, if you are willing to put in the work and understand how it works.
Yeah.
And that's really it. But yeah, I think that you probably know that you're a relatively rare person, in that you have this amazing intelligence and awareness to do such things. And I don't want to say that anyone can't, but in my own experience, in my life, you're a very rare, exceptional human being.
Well, thank you. I have a quality that's really, done 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 a lot of good for me, and that is my incomparable stubbornness. So I think even more than my intelligence is my stubbornness. It's like, I'm going to figure this out no matter what.
I would call it steadfastness, because I like to see things in terms of, we have stubbornnness, which is a jackass, which
Mhm.
comes with no knowledge and no reason or logic, and then we have steadfastness, which is, one could argue that it's the same thing, but it's really not. I just hold to what I believe, like you,
Mhm.
and I rely on knowledge, logic, and reason and the latest science to follow through on that steadfastness. That's another quality that you and I have in common.
Mhm. Well, you have more of the scientific background than I did. I never would have considered myself scientific, but I realized after talking to you that I kind of do follow the
I,
scientific method.
I was about to say, I might argue that because you're so well educated as a physical therapist, uh, a respiratory expert.
Mhm.
You've got so much education, and all that came from a scientific basis. And
That's true.
even
Yeah.
right, and even if that science may have been not totally founded then, and maybe it is, I don't know. You know better than I do in terms of your education and how you feel about how scientific
Mhm.
it was then relative to now. But I think that you. It sounds like from all that you've told me that you have a very strong scientific backing. So yeah.
Mhm. Well, we have something else in common that we discovered the last time we spoke, and I just think it's kind of funny to share with the audience because we were both really skinny kids. We were both like, pretty puny and not very strong and blah blah blah. But I was telling you a story when we spoke last time, how as a little girl I almost fell off a roller coaster,
Yeah,
and you just had the funniest look on your face because the same thing happened to you.
it did. It was not a fun experience whatsoever. Sounded like you had a little bit more help from your older sister than I did from my older brother, who was no help at all and was really laughing the entire time. Like, if he falls, he falls. Because that was, I'm not really close with my older brother at all. Never have been. But yeah, that was not a fun experience, but it was definitely a story that I identified with well, because I've never heard anyone else tell such a story.
How old were you when it happened to you?
I would probably say what that was, probably at the state fair. I don't know, probably 12, maybe 13.
Oh my God.
That's how small it
Wow.
was. I was a late bloomer, and that's what folks don't realize. I was a late bloomer. My mom actually took, because I was so despondent, that she took me in to see the doctor, and they ran tests, and they came back and they said, "Great news! You'll grow. You'll be 5'5". And I was like, "That's not great news at all."
Oh, that's awful.
Right. And I actually ended up, I'm now 5'11". So it tells you again, just, how not accurate a lot of these scientific tests were then. And they were doing their best. I'm not knocking science. I'm not
Yeah.
knocking medical doctors. I'm really not. It may sound like I am. I'm just saying that, you know, we have a tendency, especially doctors, in my experience, have a tendency to be very arrogant. And
Mhm.
they think that we know everything about everything when it comes to science and the human body, and we don't.
Yeah.
We're just, our human science is so young, and we know so very little. We know less than 10% of what's in
Mhm.
our own oceans. We know so very little about things in general, yet we're convinced that we're the greatest species in the entire universe and that no
Mhm.
one will ever top us. And yet, who knows if we'll even make it to 2050 with climate change and all the other nonsense that's going on. So, as a scientist, I don't look at science like, in my experience, the average doctor and the average scientist does. That, if you don't know something about it, if we don't have evidence and facts, then we know everything about it, and it doesn't exist. I look at it like, if we don't know something, that's the point of science. The
Mhm.
point of science is to, through theory, if then hypothesis, is to do the research and figure out what knowledge are we lacking, what are the evidence and facts, what don't we know, instead of saying like as a scientist, I believe in the soul, and I
Mhm.
believe that there's wonderful work being done at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies that's been going on now for the last 50 years. And
Wow.
they have done amazing work with reincarnation, and they have over 2,000 documented stories. And all this evidence and facts relative to whether the soul is real, etc. Yet you ask the average scientist and they'll tell you that the soul is not real, spirit's not real, and all that's simply not real because we don't have any evidence. Ask the average person in my experience who claims that they follow science, and they'll tell you the same thing. And I'm really tired, really tired of scientists and people in general saying, we don't know something, therefore that means that we know everything about that thing and it doesn't exist, when that's not how science works.
Bravo. Excellent point. I just want to go back to when you're talking about, like the skinny fat and the blood sugar discussion and the epidemic of obesity. The other one I wanted to bring up was the epidemic of diabetes.
Yeah, totally. It goes hand in hand with obesity. And so basically, what is that? It's basically blood sugar being spiked, insulin being output to bring the blood sugar back down, and it's basically wearing out the pancreas because that's what is producing the insulin, right? That's what diabetes really is your pancreas. It puts up the white flag and says, I'm done, no more, and it can no longer keep up with your crappy diet and all the crappy food that you're eating. And if you get to a point where it's permanently damaged, right, then you have to take what shots or whatever you have to actually do as a diabetic, and that's type 2. I think that type 1, if I have this correct, is actually genetic, and it's different.
It's usually a juvenile onset.
Yes, okay. And so, but that's really it. If you have type 2 diabetes, it's basically because you've eaten such a crappy, high glycemic index carb diet, which is the standard American diet. If you're eating fast food, junk food, and processed food all day, every day, you are in line for both diabetes, type 2, and obesity. If you are one of these people who's born in a biotype 1, the probabilities are in your favor that you can forego that or dodge that bullet, because your body is all muscle. And so it will consume calories. Like there was a girl who lived next door to me when I was growing up who was a biotype 1, and she could eat anything that she wanted all day and never gain a single pound because she had so much muscle on her body, right, that it was just burning calories, right? And that's the advantage of a biotype 1. But if you're a biotype 2, a biotype 3, or a biotype 4, like I was, you have skinny fat all over your body's burning much fewer calories. If you're eating this typical American diet of junk, fast, and processed food, then you are at a greatly increased risk of diabetes type 2, because your body just can't burn that many calories, and you're going to get into that vicious cycle of too much blood sugar, the insulin output, you're going to burn out the actual pancreas, which leads to type 2 diabetes.
And that leads to a whole plethora of different other diseases like heart disease and stroke and blah, blah, blah. And you just start spiraling down. And I think that one of my pet peeves is, I like to bust the myths of aging. It's like, okay, you're at this age. I mean, people are shocked that I'm not on any medication. And it's like, well, what, I don't need to be. And even one of my doctors like, you're not on anything. Do you have any idea how unusual this is? Do you want to get on something? Just, this is like, like, no, I don't want to get on anything.
Well, but you also show it. You don't look like you're 67. You look like you might be in your early 50s, maybe late
66.
40s. Right? I'm sorry.
66.
But you don't look your age. And the reason that you don't look your age, unless you've had plastic surgery, that you're not.
No one's coming at this face with anything sharp. I have ninja skills.
And so everything is just natural, but you are the living example of how one can age extremely gracefully if you have a proper diet, exercise, and lifestyle, which goes hand in hand with the blue zones across the planet, and why we are big fans of a low carb diet. And you can do a low carb diet with pretty much any type of diet, whether it's omnivore, vegetarian omnivore, vegan omnivore, carnivore omnivore, if it's just vegetarian omnivore, whatever. All of that can be a low carb diet. But we are big fans of the blue zone Mediterranean diet because they are these 5 blue zones across the planet where folks live well into their hundreds, like you. They aren't on any allopathic drugs. They live a healthy, normal life day to day because they have such a healthy diet, exercise, and lifestyle. And that's what we want to get to, is people living healthy so that the healthcare costs aren't through the roof. Because who's paying for all these drugs? Who's paying for all this healthcare that folks need for diabetes and obesity and such, right? A lot of it is being covered by taxpayers. People don't realize that, the healthcare in our country is so expensive because we're not holding the companies responsible that are selling this ridiculously low quality, unhealthy food to the masses. And they say, well, it's at cheap prices. I beg to differ. For the first time in like over a decade, I went down and bought a fast food burger. It was $6 for a single fast food burger, which is not cheap. 10 years ago, when I bought that same burger, it was like $2.
Wow.
So what I'm getting at is most people, when I talk to them about trying to find a way not to scare them into changing their diet, like we were saying earlier, because folks don't react well to that, finding a way to educate them, the first thing that I hear from them, well, I just can't afford it. And I say, yeah, you really can afford it. You really can't afford fast food. You just have it in your mind that you can, but you don't realize, especially nowadays, how expensive fast food has gotten. And it's just one more thing where I'm hoping that the folks who are listening to this podcast realize that you can go down to Trader Joe's. You can get really healthy food, find food that you enjoy eating at a really good price that will help bring down healthcare costs, will help deal with the climate change issues, which are a big part of that is folks eating too much meat, which is a big part of the methane gas being put off from so many cows, yada, yada. So all these things are interconnected. And what we're hoping is that folks educate themselves. And all this is up on our website at fellow1.com, but you are the living example of this. You look fantastic at your age. There's no doubt that you will make it to 120 years. And relative to where our science is going in terms of things like CRISPR, it is not unreasonable. It is not science fiction anymore that we can live 200, 300, 400, 500, 1,000 years old, which I'm certain that you probably wouldn't mind doing, and I certainly wouldn't either. So, anyways.
Well, I don't know. I think I'll call it quits around 120. I think. I'm not really sure. So let me just ask you. So when you're talking about do you have a group of people that you're working with, or they work under you or with you, or how does that work?
So I do work with some diet and fitness folks. They are more consultants right now, and then I do have a web dev team, and one of them helps out with all of the equations up on the site. So if you take the scientific bi-type quiz, he plays a huge role in coming up with those equations and algorithm, that we are using to calculate the adjusted Mifflin, the diet scores, the exercise and the lifestyle scores. All those seem like they are relatively basic, and all things relative, they kind of are. But if you were to see the amount of work that we put in on the spreadsheets and figuring out what the current science says, and then breaking it all down into numbers, because that's how you do an equation, is from numbers, is breaking all that down and then figuring out what is the actual equation so that we can calculate that out. All that is done with a trusted member of our team who I really do enjoy working with. We are looking at, we would love to bring more people on like you who have all of this expertise and knowledge and such, and we are definitely working on that, but obviously as a nonprofit, funds were always a bit limited. So your audience can always help out. They can go and take the bi-type quiz. They can go use our scientific weight loss diary, which, by the way, we are not in competition with MyFitnessPal or Calorie King or the Apple Fitness app or Fitbit. We're not in competition with any of those apps. You can use all those apps in harmony with our weight loss diary. The point of our weight loss diary is to hold yourself accountable. You can have everything up on your quiz profile page. Once you take the quiz, you can use a pen name. There are no face images or faces in the images, so you can maintain your privacy and security. We moderate all comments on the site. We will not tolerate bullying, fat shaming, hating, or trolling of any kind. And the idea is once you've taken that quiz, you have it on your phone, so you can be down at the gym and you can show people your quiz if you want to. They can see all your scientific data if you're using the scientific weight loss program, and you can have people support your journey, but you can see it all there,
Nice.
holding you accountable, so that you can watch your actual progress and change, yada yada.
So you are actually, are you actually coaching clients, or it is done through the app?
Well said. So technically we are coaching, but we use something called Ask Gnosis. So think of it like Siri or Alexa. We have it set up on the site, and we're also set up on social media so that folks who aren't on the site can ask us questions on social media. Albeit, please keep in mind we're very busy, so we'll get to questions as we can. But on the site, if you buy the advanced scientific weight loss program, you get access to the Ask Gnosis team, which I'm on, and you can ask diet, exercise, and lifestyle questions to help further clarify what's best for me and my body type. You can also buy single credits. But you can definitely access us so that you can ask us whatever you'd like relative to science-based. We use the latest science-based diet, exercise, and lifestyle information, and we heavily use high Moz DA and Google SERP1 links, so that we know that we're getting the latest science that's out there.
You guys are really high tech.
That's our goal. Is we're hoping to utilize technology in a positive way, which is why we are up on social media, but we also are very concerned about social media because there's a lot of nonsense, a lot of falseness, a lot of lies in general, and a lot of these images that are being passed around up on social media are these photoshopped, filtered images that just aren't true. And so many young people especially are they see those images and then they say, well, I want to look like that. And it's like, well, will your body type actually allow you to look like that? Probably not if you are a body type 2, 3, or 4. And the only way that they can come anywhere close to it is then by starving themselves or doing some unsafe, unhealthy diet, exercise, or lifestyle practice, which then leads to things like the mental health crisis that we're dealing with young people, and suicides. So please be very careful about the images and the like that you see up on social media. There's so many gimmicks and fads and nonsense that's not based on any science whatsoever. We have the real science at our website, FLO1.com. We believe in science because we know that when you follow science truly, that it works very, very, very well. We are always open to new science as it rolls in. So if anyone hears this podcast and says, well, you said this, and I have this new article that says, or this new study that says this, please send it. Please let us know. We're happy to talk with you about it, and we are happy to change our minds relative to what we think is right now as new science does roll in.
Excellent. Do you have any other final words or pearls of wisdom that you want to drop on the audience before we sign off?
We do have a book. It's based on my story. It's a bit of a risque name. It's called Overprivileged White Guy. I named it that because being born in a body type 4 and my struggles and hardships, I could not imagine how much harder my life would have been had I not been a white dude. And I didn't really recognize how bad racism was in the country until I got out into the real world and out of my sheltered upbringing. But I know that it's real, and that's why I named it that. So, but the book tells the story about how I came to the research, the 4 body types and such. And it's not written in boring scientific jargon. It's actually in novel format.
Mhm.
And I think it's pretty interesting. But you can get that up on the site as well. And the final thing that I'll say is please remember that the point of our scientific body types is to understand your real body type so that you can figure out what the best diet, exercise, and lifestyle is based on science for you. And that, believe in yourself. Don't listen to what other people are telling you. Believe in yourself, figure it out. And sites like ours are there so that you have the scientific information so you hopefully can go and figure it out.
Awesome. And you'd be a fantastic resource for people. So thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for being here. I love talking to you because you're just so fascinating. And this topic is something that it's completely new to me. I mean, I guess intuitively I understood some of it, but I think it's wonderful work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
I really appreciate you having me on the show. I very much enjoy talking with you. I think you're a phenomenal human being.
Thank you. And if you find some changes in your scientific approach and you want to come back on the show and update us when you do, I would love to have you back.
Would love to. Thank you.
Okay, and everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And remember, words of wisdom, if I ever heard them, believe in yourself, because when you believe in yourself, all things are possible. Make sure that you check out Mark's website. I think you have a Facebook page, or is that right? Or
That's right. We're up on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, and there might be a few more, but we're on all of the main ones, either under the 4 body types, or there's a few that you can do the Asknosis also, and you can ask us questions up there. Just please, again, keep in mind that we're very busy.
okay, excellent. And I will have all those links in the show notes. So once again, thank you everybody for listening. Mark's a great guy and he can really help you change your life and get the body that you were meant to have. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.